Iran is weeks away from getting nuclear weapons.
Iran is really at a breakout point. There's no doubt that they have enough enriched uranium. They more than likely have the physics package or the detonation system. My guess is Iran is very close on all three.
Do you believe it to be weeks away?
They could do that anytime they want.
Is a US military option possible to stop the so called Iranian nuclear breakout?
Well, America has always told its allies in the region that they would never let Iran get to a weapon of mass destruction with nuclear.
If that is true, how does one ever imagine that one will be able to control the spiraling violence in the Middle East?
The mullah is attempting, I believe, to create more conflict and chaos in the region.
You're watching the Times of India News Point. I'm, of course, Aditi Prasad, and today we are joined by the former Rear Admiral in the US Navy and a Pentagon insider, Michael Hewitt. He's also co founder and CEO of IP3 Corporation, which is a lead US integrator for the development and operations of peaceful and secure civil nuclear power in the global marketplace. Mr. Hewitt, the Middle East was in a dangerous place before the Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh was killed on Iranian soil. And now, with his death, do you think the Middle East is now moving towards the brink or has moved to the brink and it's just going to get that much more dangerous?
Well, thank you for having me. And I think this death of the Hamas leader is the latest in what we're watching escalate in the region for the last year, actually, and particularly after the Hamas attack on the 7th of October. I believe that a large part of this has just simply been American weakness in the Middle East. And if you look at Iran, who is really orchestrating the attacks by the proxy networks of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, they're all in a very dangerous situation right now. And unfortunately, the Americans have not given Israel the weaponry and the authority they need to destroy Hamas. And so Israel is doing what I would expect them to do and what I have seen them do in the past, which is to take out leaders, to reach deep into Iran with attacks against both the nuclear program, nuclear scientists, and of course now this attack on the Hamas leader at the residence, which again demonstrates that Israel has deep reach into Iran to disrupt its Islamic Republic and some of the fanatical mullahs and their activities in country.
Iranian supreme leader has already said that Iran will respond. He's hinted at a direct response from Iranian soil, not like the April 12th or 13th attack, where projectiles were fired in dozens from Iran towards Israel, but mostly on barren land or non crowded areas or on the outskirts. This time, what's your anticipation of what kind of a retaliation are we expecting? Because there's a lot of chatter about that.
Well, I think you bring up a very valid point that the last occasion when Iran announced it was going to attack Israel, they gave a lot of warning. In many respects, the attack was not very effective from a military perspective, but strategically, Iran demonstrated that it has the wherewithal to attack Israel directly, not through their proxies. Now, in this particular case, as I always like to remind people, the Islamic Republic will always do what's best first for the regime. And what Iran will attempt to do, I believe, is respond to the recent attacks in their country, but do it in a way that doesn't allow there to be escalation. So I think what you're going to see is this continuous back and forth. And I believe the Iranians are actually trying to entice Israel to become more aggressive militarily in Lebanon, in Yemen, and perhaps directly in the country of Iran. This is really more about the mullahs attempting, I believe, to create more conflict and chaos in the region.
And are they succeeding?
Absolutely, they're succeeding. And I think they're succeeding for many reasons, but one of them is they are backed by China and Russia. They are receiving weaponry, they are providing weaponry, obviously, to the Russians, and they are getting the kind of support they need to turn their proxy networks loose. I am really surprised for the last 10 months how we've allowed the Houthis to basically take attacks almost daily at U.S. forces in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aden. And eventually, one of these attacks is going to be successful. And when it is, then you're going to see the kind of escalation that we're quite concerned about. The United States controls its interests in the Middle East through what we call escalation dominance. In other words, we can keep the fight from getting worse in the region. But right now, America doesn't have that type of escalation dominance control.
You talked about American weakness leading to the current situation. Would you care to elaborate there?
Well, I think what we've seen time and time in the region, I believe, from Iran are two things: the destruction of Israel and to chase America out of the Middle East. And part of the way they do that is they just try to drive American interest out of the Middle East. We have great interest in the Middle East. We have great allies in the Middle East. And when you look at the Abraham Accords and the kinds of things that were being developed under President Trump, I think we were seeing a stabilizing Middle East, which goes against what Iran wants. And so now, under the Biden administration, where we have limited our response to these attacks, we have limited Israel's ability to defend itself by taking on Hamas in Gaza. And we have become very, very pro Palestine with lots of anti Semitism in America. These are all signals of weakness by America against protecting its allies in the region.
Let me just come to Iran's nuclear program. You have very strong views about Iran's nuclear program and how they've developed over the years. Incidentally, Senator Lindsey Graham, I was the one I spoke to you about before we started this interview. He's come up with two resolutions, two bills to sort of allow use of military force to cut down Iran's nuclear program before it becomes a reality. And he says that it's not going to be months, but Iran is weeks away from getting nuclear weapons in place. What's your sense?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the joint cooperation on nuclear with Iran, the JCPOA, which was developed under the Obama administration, really gave Iran a legal pathway to a weapon of mass destruction, both with their ability to enrich uranium under certain restrictions, but also our lack of understanding of the cooperation with North Korea, with Russia, with China. And so when you look at where Iran is in 2024 with its nuclear program, there is no doubt that they have been able to enrich enough uranium to have enough highly enriched uranium, perhaps for a nuclear detonation, a nuclear test of some kind. And so you'll hear this term breakout. What Lindsey Graham is referring to, and I believe he is very accurate, and I would imagine Israel sees it very much the same way. Iran is really at a breakout point. There's no doubt that they have enough enriched uranium. They more than likely have the physics package or the detonation system, and perhaps have even developed a delivery system, a missile system. So when you look at those three components of a nuclear program, my guess is Iran is very close on all three. So what Senator Graham is reflecting upon is it time to take kinetic action to disrupt Iran's nuclear program? This was the commitment that the Obama administration made to Israel and the region as part of the JCPOA, that in fact we would never let Iran get to a weapons program. But in fact, I think they are very close to having a weapons program.
Do you believe it to be weeks away, like Senator Graham?
I believe if Iran chose to now to demonstrate that they have a weapons program, which is what I believe they would do, they would they could do that anytime they want. So yes, I agree with Senator Graham that if Iran decided to, let's say, do a high yield test of a detonation in their country to demonstrate that they have the capability and the wherewithal, I believe they could do that anytime they wanted.
Is a US military option possible to stop the so called Iranian nuclear breakout?
Well, America has always told its allies in the region that they would never let Iran get to a weapon of mass destruction with nuclear. Now, you can only surmise that if they're unable to disrupt it peacefully through negotiations, through sanctions, through intelligence programs, perhaps with the kinds of activities we've seen Israel conduct in the past, both on centrifuges as well as people and scientists, that the last resort would be some type of a kinetic attack on Iran's nuclear capacity. So I would assume that America has that option. I would also assume that Israel has that option.
You know, it's not just Senator Graham, it's also Blinken. He said about 2 weeks ago that Iran's nuclear weapons breakout time is probably down to 1 to 2 weeks. If that is true, it's already 2 weeks since he said this. If that is true, how does one ever imagine that one will be able to control the spiraling violence in the Middle East? Because then there is no end to this.
No, that's a very good point. And I think, unfortunately, when it comes to stopping countries that want to pursue a weapon of mass destruction, we have never been very successful. Look at North Korea, a very isolated country that really has a weapons program and a civil nuclear program. Iran could do the same thing that North Korea has done. So I find it very disheartening that the Secretary of State would say, yes, they're weeks away, when in fact it was their very program, the JCPOA, that was supposed to keep Iran perpetually away from a weapons program. So it really is disappointing when the policymakers who convinced us that the JCPOA would stop Iran or convince Iran not to pursue a weapons program are now saying that they may be weeks away.
If Iran gets its hand on and you're saying that that's already a reality, if Iran already has a nuclear weapon in its arsenal, clearly then there is no hope for peace. There's no chance for peace. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think they're directly correlated in that type of fashion. And I would caveat by saying that what Iran has today, by our guess, is they have the ingredients. So they have the uranium, they have the physics package, and they may even have a delivery system for a nuclear weapon. That does not mean they are a nuclear weapon country. It means they have the ingredients. And this breakout term that you hear often simply means that if they decided they wanted to have an active weapons program, they could do it within weeks. It doesn't mean they have committed to it yet. So I think it's important to distinguish between a country that has a weapons program and a country that could have a weapons program. That being said, I think it's important to realize that we may have to deal with a nuclear weapon Iran in the future.
Right. And, and I'm talking about May. May is when Iran had publicly said that it will change its nuclear doctrine if its existence is threatened. And right now, with this attack on Iranian soil, which took out the Hamas political chief, do you think that accounts for its existence being threatened? Because the supreme leader has definitely already said that there is going to be a blowback.
If I was to guess, I would say that the supreme leader, as they always do, think first and foremost about protection of the regime, which means they don't want to create the kind of kinetic attack on their country that may be developed if, in fact, they had a weapons program. That being said, what they are doing, in my opinion, is trying to create escalation challenges in the region by saying, if we need to protect our country and our sovereignty, we will use a nuclear weapon. So it's a lot of rhetoric, but I think it's very planned rhetoric to, again, entice Israel into a more kinetic fight and perhaps get America to continue to be weaker and weaker in the Middle East and try to convince Israel to back down from Hamas, back down from Hezbollah. And I think that's ultimately what Iran is attempting to do, is to pit America against its ally Israel.
All right. Thank you so much for those perspectives. Let's just hope you're right that it's just the ingredients, and but it doesn't take long for the ingredients to actually transform into something very real and threatening for the entire, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire world. But thank you for those perspectives, and thank you for speaking to Times of India. Thank you, viewers, for watching this broadcast. We will come back to you with more. Stay tuned.
Thank you.